First up, let's talk about Sony. Sony is one of the biggest manufacturers out there. They've got a lot of cameras and a lot of lenses. Now, the interesting thing is that they have kind of a different setup on cameras than most companies do. They are focusing on full-frame mirrorless cameras, but unlike traditional companies that would have a low-end product, a mid-end, a high-mid, and a professional level, they put several cameras on a very high level, but targeted towards different types of photography. For instance, they have the A9 Mark III, which is geared towards sports photography, maybe photojournalism as well. They have the A7R Mark V, which is a resolution model, fifth version of it, which is really good at landscape photography and high resolution, possibly portrait photography. They have the S model, the A7S III, third generation of that one, which is really geared towards video. They have the A7 Mark IV, which is more of their generic base camera. They have a couple of compact cameras, which is the C in the letter there. They have one that's designed for blogging, the ZV-E1. And then they have A1, which is kind of the best of the best. Now, maybe it's not better than the best, but it's if somebody who wants really high resolution, really fast shooting, kind of wants the best of everything as much as it is possible. That's going to be the A1. And so it's a little different setup where there's a lot of different categories in there. Now, with the crop frame mirrorless, this is where Sony got started making cameras, and this was back in 2010. And this has really not seen a lot of attention by Sony recently. They did recently introduce the A6700, but that really hasn't been refreshed a lot of the cameras in here. These cameras they feel like they're really filtered quite a bit. They're held back because Sony seems to say, if you want to be serious about photography, you got to get into full frame. Yeah, we'll make some compact cameras that are fairly nice, but we're not going to give them too many good features. We're going to save all that for the full frame stuff. And so they are definitely focused on full frame, but they've been around mirrorless for a long time. And so there's a lot of lenses and a lot of cameras, new and used, in that crop frame department. All right, let's move on to the next one. Fujifilm, another kind of interesting company. Maybe they are all interesting. They started off in 2012 with their X system, and they have really been pushing hard on their 1.5 crop system. And one of the things I liked about Fuji is that they really focused on this. Companies like Sony, like I just mentioned, they have full frame, and so they get distracted by full frame, and they're not really bringing out a lot of good stuff for their crop frame camera. And this is where I think a lot of great photography and great cameras are for many people, is in this 1.5 crop frame area. And Fuji has really been the only manufacturer that has focused on it. They brought out a large collection, the best collection of lenses for this format size sensor. They have a number of good cameras. They too also have kind of a number of high-end cameras. The X-T5 is one of my favorite. It's got kind of a classic design to it. The X-H2 though, and the X-H2S are some kind of newer generation cameras, a little bit more traditional DSLR style cameras with higher resolution and or fast shooting capabilities. And then they make a couple of smaller compact ones. They used to have more camera options on the mid to lower end, but the market's been going a little bit more upscale and there's less on the lower end. Now they've been focusing on this and they haven't been too distracted, maybe just a little bit distracted, because they also wanted to have a higher end system. But rather than going full frame and competing with Sony and Canon and Nikon, they decided to leapfrog them into the world of medium format. And so they've come out with a number of cameras. The latest is the GFX 100 Mark II, and it seems to have really bridged the gap in medium format cameras, always being kind of a 2 steps behind all the other cameras when it comes to features and focusing and what have you. And this has really brought it up to kind of very current good levels. Now, it's always easy to tell on the medium format cameras with Fuji and many other manufacturers how many megapixels. It's right in the name. And so you can see whether it has 50 or 100 megapixels. Now, these are two very different markets, and there's not much overlap between the two. Not too many users are going to own the medium format and the smaller X system as well. And so this medium format system is not really distracting Fuji too much from making really good quality crop frame cameras. And so if you are looking for a crop frame camera in the 1.5 crop category, Fuji is my primary choice there. Sony gets distracted by their full frame. They really don't give all their good stuff to their smaller crop frame siblings there. Same thing with Canon, same thing with Nikon. They're all kind of just starter pieces. With Fuji, this is a main enterprise. Yes, they do have two different systems, but they're not sharing a common lens mount. They don't share common lenses between them. They're just two very different markets in their case. Next up, let's talk about Nikon, one of the granddaddies of names in photography. Now, they still have DSLRs available, but they have fully shifted their focus onto mirrorless cameras. They have a very good collection of entry-level cameras like the Z5 on up through the Z6 Mark II, good kind of mid-range camera, kind of a retro-styled ZF, all the way up to the Z8 and Z9, which is their top-performing cameras. And so this is where they're focused. They're bringing out a lot of lenses. They're bringing out a fair number of cameras in this category, and that is the direction they're going. They do have cropped frame mirrorless as well, and they have brought out a few cameras in a relatively short period of time. We're still waiting to hear about some lenses from Nikon in this regard. They've brought out a couple of lenses for their crop frame, but these do share the Z mount is the same between the crop frame and the full frame. So you can use the full frame lenses on those crop frame cameras. You're kind of spending more than you need to because it's got a larger coverage area, but they all work, and in some cases it's fine. It's just that I'd like to see a few more dedicated camera bodies and lenses for that crop frame system in there. Now, Nikon does still make DSLRs, or at least they still sell what they have left in stock. This seems to be a diminishing number each year. As I mentioned at the top end of this guide, they haven't produced any cameras or lenses in the DSLR field in the last 3 years. So I think the writing is on the wall. They're not going to do any more here. And so they're just going to keep these around until they're sold out. Maybe they'll make some more if there's a demand for them. All of these DSLR cameras are fantastic cameras. They're great cameras. There's a ton of lenses out there. And so for certain people on a budget or looking for a deal, these DSLR cameras are a fantastic way of getting into a lot of high-end photographic gear for a very good price. All right, the largest name in photography and photographic camera manufacturing is Canon. They are the biggest manufacturer. They have the largest portion of sales, and they, of course, are focusing on mirrorless full-frame cameras. They don't have as many options as Nikon at this current moment, but they do have a good collection from entry level to high end. Now, there is a missing element in here right now, and that is the R1. R1 doesn't exist yet. It's not official. It's rumored to be at this point, but it's pretty obvious. Canon has loved the number one for decades, and so we know there's going to be an R1 at some point, and it's going to be the best of the best that they have to make. Right now, they have an R3, which is a really good camera, but it's not a high-resolution camera. It's designed for sports and photojournalism at 24 megapixels. The R5 is where a lot of people are with Canon gear, and this has been a very, very popular camera. It's been our best-selling camera guide by far. It's super popular. 45 megapixels. It's a couple of years old now, but it's still a great performing camera. I love using that camera. So they have a very good collection, albeit not huge, but they are covering a lot of people's needs with these 4 cameras. They do have the RF mount with crop frame cameras as well, and they have a number of options in there. And they maybe give them credit here. They have the most options on kind of entry-level prices on base-level cameras. And so they have some good options for people who want to get into the mirrorless Canon system for a reasonable amount of money. Now, there's not a lot of lenses to choose that are reasonable price, but there are some, and there's enough to get going in here to get somebody started in photography. So they're doing one of the best, almost as good as Fuji here when it comes to crop level cameras. Now, the weird thing with Canon is that they were playing around with this whole mirrorless idea with a completely different mount starting several years ago. A decade ago, they decided to come out with a mirrorless system, and it's an EF M mount. There's a couple of cameras left. There's some small lenses in there. It's kind of an interesting little system, and it was all designed about being smaller and very easy to travel with. It was never designed to be very serious. It appears now, maybe officially, at least unofficially, that this is a discontinued system. And the weird thing is having two mirrorless mount systems, we all knew that that wasn't going to work. And the R mount, the RF mount, excuse me, is the route forward with Canon. And so that EFM mount looks like it's a bit of a dead end and will be going away very quickly. Like Nikon, they still have a number of DSLRs that are available for sale. They had a huge, huge following for many, many years. If they're full frame DSLR cameras, they still have some great cameras there that are still available. Perhaps they'll make them for a while. I think they're all being phased out. They used to have a ton of crop frame DSLRs, and they still have 4 out there. So there is a lot to choose from. But generally, both with Nikon and with Canon, I'm not recommending going DSLR in most every case, because once again, no new cameras, no new lenses is a dried up ecosystem that you don't want to get involved in looking forward if you're planning to go forward with your photography. So the mirrorless system is especially strong with Canon, especially in full frame, because that's what they're focused on. All right, completely different game here. OM System, formerly of Olympus. They kind of spun off the photographic division, and it is now run by a company called OM System. And they have taken on the old Olympus cameras. They've started to change the name to OM System on some of their newer cameras. And so in this case, you have a camera company that is dedicated on the 4/3 sensor, the micro 4/3 camera. And these are really nice cameras. They have a ton of features in them. The cameras themselves are generally pretty small. The EM1X is a big camera, but they were designing that to be big, full-bodied camera. The OM1 is an incredibly popular camera. I don't know if most of the people in the photographic world know how popular that camera is. That's one of our best-selling classes here, is on the OM1. We have a very in-depth class on it, and there is a very passionate but very quiet group of OM users. And I think they really like the compact size, the fast autofocusing, and the long lenses that are not breaking your back to carry them around. You can have a 400 lens that, lets in a fair bit of light in a small size. And so birding photographers absolutely love the OM1 system. If you do sports photography, it can be very, very good. I like just the build and design of the lenses. I've used them for backpacking and adventure because they're very waterproof in most cases. And so I'm a big fan of OM System, and I like this micro 4/3. I know it's not for everybody, but it works really well. And the image quality that you get out of this is good enough to meet most professional needs that you can imagine. So the quality is extremely good, even though it is a smaller size sensor. And so I do highly recommend these for people who like what they have to offer. All right, Panasonic. Well, they once again have their own thing going. So not a long historical name in photography. Panasonic got involved with mirrorless cameras back in 2008. They were working with Olympus at the time with a combined micro 4/3 system. So one of the advantages that they had is that you could take a Panasonic lens and put it on an Olympus camera, and an Olympus lens and put it on a Panasonic camera, and it would work. Now, as things have progressed since then, well, they've advanced with a number of features that require a lens of the same manufacturer for it to work. And so if you're going to have a Panasonic camera, yes, you can use Olympus lenses, and they will work well in most all cases, but there's a few cases where you really want to have the Panasonic lens. And then the same thing goes with OM System or Olympus equipment, where it's nice to have that same brand of lens on there. But they opened up their lens mount, and there is a ton of lenses available in this micro 4/3 system. Now, Panasonic has kind of geared a little bit more towards shooting video in a lot of their cameras. So Olympus and OM System cameras are good at shooting video, but Panasonic just offers more options. They have a better system if you are into shooting video or hybrid work. Panasonic is a great way to go. So they've been really, really popular with people shooting video. And a lot of people are saying, well, I like to shoot video and I love Panasonic, but I want full frame. And so eventually they came out with full frame. And so they brought out a fairly wide collection of full frame cameras fairly quickly. we haven't seen a lot of refresh once they've come out. So they're a little bit slower. And now that they have full frame, we're running into that same problem we've seen with Sony and other manufacturers, is they've got two systems and they're trying to balance out with their lens engineers and designers and building everything. We've seen a lot of action on full frame for a while, and now we're not seeing much action with micro four thirds, and they'll throw us a bone every once in a while with a new camera or a couple of new lenses. But the micro four thirds lens system is pretty well built out, so there's not a lot of new stuff. Maybe we'll see some second generation lenses as we go along from here on out. But they seem to be a little bit split as to what they're doing. But one thing remains true, and it seems that most people who have Panasonic are usually pretty interested in video because these cameras are very good. They have just a lot of the good video features that you want. And so if you are interested in hybrid shooting, this is probably the first manufacturer I'd have you look at. You could look at either one of these systems that are available. All right, well, if you want to talk about different, Leica is the way to talk about something different. So they still make film cameras. That's right, they make 3 different film cameras. They made a really popular camera back in the 80s called the M6, and it went out production back in the early 90s or something. And it got traded around on the used market, and everybody's saying, you got to get the old Leica M6, that's a great camera. And so Leica says, okay, we'll make it again. And so they started making it again recently. And so if you want an old classic M6, few slight tweaks on it, you can still get it again. They have a couple other versions on there as well. And this is with their M mount. And of course, they've also taken that digital many years ago, and they have a pretty good collection of very, very high-end. All Leica stuff is very high-end, very well built, very well made. M11 is kind of their new standard that they're at, and they're developing various versions of that. And so you can get a film camera and a digital camera. You can share lenses back and forth with them with that M mount that started back in 1954. But they've also wanted to go more modern as well, so they've developed their own full-frame mirrorless system, the SL cameras, and they have some very nice cameras that compete against the best of the other cameras out there in many, many ways. They have a relatively small collection of lenses. The nice thing here is that it is an L mount, which is shared with Panasonic's full-frame cameras. So there is some sharing of lenses, which is really good because Leica really hasn't focused on this a lot. It hasn't been a big seller. It's very expensive for the cameras and very expensive for some of the lenses. They're well made, and we can debate whether they're worth it or not, but they are a lot of money is the truth. And they do share that with Panasonic, so there is a few more choices in there, but it's definitely more of a niche system. Now, I think officially this may be a discontinued camera, but the rumors are they're bringing out another one, but they got to have something out there because they have a number of very nice medium format lenses. And so I would hope this isn't going to be discontinued, but this is maybe one of the weaker ones, you might say, in the collection of cameras I'm talking about as far as can you find it available for sale right now. So they too have wanted to have a range of different products, and all of their products are very high end. The S3 is a fantastic professional level, commercial level camera. And we'll hopefully see more of that from them in the future because medium format doesn't have a lot of options out there. All right, definitely in the different category is Pentax, which is owned by Ricoh. So Ricoh is actually the company that bought Pentax up, but they've kept the Pentax name on the cameras. One of those long classic names in the history of photography. They have decided to stick with DSLRs. They have chosen not to go with mirrorless. I think probably the cost of changing over is something that they just could not afford. And so they become a smaller, more boutique company dealing with specialized cameras like a monochrome camera. And so their models are starting to age a little bit. There's a couple that are actually fairly recent, but they're just very slight refreshes on older cameras. And so if you really love DSLRs, well, Pentax is the way to go because they're still making them. And so they do make the crop frame versions. They do make a full frame version. They don't have the greatest selection. There's a little bit limited selection when it comes to lenses. And so this isn't something that I generally would recommend to somebody new into photography. But if you have it now and you're happy with it, well, at least they're still making it, which is a great thing. They have also had a long history in medium format over the years. And so when things went digital, they came out with a couple of digital versions of their medium format 645 camera. And this proved to be a very popular system. This is a DSLR style medium format camera, but it's been a long time since we've seen any new action on the medium format front from Pentax. I just don't think they have the resources to really pay attention to it, but it exists out there. And it's probably going to be out there for a while because there's just a fair bit of equipment out there, but not a direction that I would recommend going on medium format right now. Right now, Fuji is the one that is producing the most number of cameras and the most number of lenses when it comes to medium format. All right, let's talk about one of the classic names in photography, Hasselblad. I own a Hasselblad back in the day of medium format film, loved it, actually went back to Sweden and visited the factory. Hasselblad, like Leica, makes very, very good quality stuff. They don't make any entry-level stuff, you might say. It's all top of the line. Now, they have shifted their focus in years, and they're now kind of really focusing on their X mount system. And in this case, it's a smaller, lighter weight camera. You might think of it as a large Leica camera. And so these have some very nice features, some very attractive lenses. It's not a huge collection, but it is some very nice equipment. Now, I'm still going to mention their kind of standard studio system. They were coming out with lots of new cameras. These things got incredibly expensive. We're talking about $50,000 for a camera. And this is what some of the commercial studios were using. And we haven't really seen a lot of new action over on that particular H-mount series. And my feeling for this is that the standard full frame cameras and other medium format cameras, I'm mainly talking about Fuji here, have started to offer higher and higher quality products at lower and lower prices that Hasselblad just could not compete with. When you are trying to sell a $50,000 camera versus a $10,000 camera, and the $10,000 camera does pretty much everything the $50,000 one, there's not a lot of people who are willing to spend that extra 40 grand just to get the Hasselblad name on it. And so we may see these disappearing. They're just very niche at this point in time. All right, so that lets you know a little bit about some of the different brands out there. Let's talk a little bit about the actual lens systems that we have as options. There's a lot of different lens mounts out there, cameras and lenses that fix up to it. And, well, you want to get the camera that's right for you. And part of that is getting the lenses that are right for you, and part of being a part of a system, because all of this is where you take the lens off the camera body and you put something else on there. And so it's about having a system that fits your needs. Now, if you know exactly what your needs are and you only need 2 lenses and you found a manufacturer that makes those 2 lenses, well, then that's great. But a lot of photographers are not sure what their needs are going to be a year down the road or 5 years down the road, and they don't want to have to keep switching from one brand to the next. And so you want to be involved in a healthy ecosystem of bodies and lenses. And so you want new cameras. It's nice to have used cameras on the market. Even if you don't buy used cameras, at some point you might be selling your camera. And if there's a used marketplace where people like to buy your camera, well, that's going to get you some dollars for your next new camera. And so you want something that is popular, something that has a lot of current models out, something that is going to be going forward, having new cameras out there. What about the lenses? You want a collection of lenses that are already established. You want new lenses that are coming out. What about aftermarket lenses? It depends on what your needs are for lenses and how much you like to play around with them. But these are all considerations when considering which mount you want to be involved in. So I've taken a list of all of the most popular mounts, and I wanted to kind of compare them as to how strong these lens systems are. And before in previous buyer's guide, I just kind of based it on my own opinion. And this time I wanted to put some factual data behind it. And so I developed my own algorithm and I plugged it in, and here are the most popular camera systems and the least popular ones out on the market. And I'm breaking them up into 3 categories: weak, medium, and strong. Now, the way that I came up with my algorithm for this is I looked at how many cameras they brought out, how many lenses they brought out, and how many aftermarket lenses are available for a particular system. And I developed a scoring system where I ended up with a score. So here's your scores on all the different manufacturers and their different mounts. And so you can see the Sony FE mount, which is their full frame lens system, won the category. Now, the fact that it won and is better than Fuji X or Nikon Z system or the Canon RF, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. They're all really strong systems in my opinion. Now, how I came up with my system is, well, it's goofy and it's unique, and you can come up with your own system and calculate it yourself. But what I did is I took how many new cameras have been introduced over the last 4 years. 4 years is about a normal lifetime, you might say, for a camera until a new one gets introduced. The camera actually lasts much longer than that. And so you can keep a camera much more than 4 years. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying a replacement model is likely to come every 4 years. So Sony's going to have probably about 10 different cameras that are viable out on the market right now. Then I multiplied their cameras and I gave them 50 points. Why? Just because 50 points sounds like a nice number. I gave them 50 points for every new camera they came out with in the last 4 years. And then with lenses, I gave them 20 points for every new lens they've come out with in the last 4 years. And then I looked at just all the available lenses and I gave them 1 point for every lens, whether it's from them or some other manufacturer. And you can see that some lens mounts are very, very popular. So for instance, in my medium category is the Olympus Micro Four Thirds system. Now I think that's an old great system. However, Olympus sold it off to OM System, and there's been a slowdown in the number of new cameras and new lenses. So I'm a little concerned, and that's why it's not in the strong category. It's really good if you look at the total number of lenses available. You can see that 206 number. That is showing that there's a lot of aftermarket lenses. The Canon RF system is kind of a newer system for Canon, but it's pretty strong because they've come out with a fair number of cameras in the last 4 years and lots of lenses. There are a lot of new lenses coming out. They are really bringing them out quickly. Unfortunately, the total lenses for Canon is not that strong because they have a closed lens mount, which means they have not given its standards and allowed other manufacturers to make lenses. They are currently, they are restricting other manufacturers from selling autofocus lenses for the Canon RF system. It's part of their proprietary system, and they want to keep all the lens sales. And I think this is not a great thing for us users because it's nice to have Sigma and Tamron and Tokina and other brands be able to make lenses. And this is why Sony has won this little competition here, because they make a lot of cameras, they make a lot of lenses, and they let other people make lenses for their camera. And so I think any of the strong categories are very safe places to be looking at getting into a camera system. I think OM system is still quite good. But then as you go down the list, you can see the numbers start dropping pretty dramatically as to systems that don't have a lot of vibrance to them, you might say. Now, do I not recommend a category and week? Well, not necessarily. There's some good options in there if they fit your need. This is just a rating system to see how vibrant cameras, lenses, and all the aftermarket lenses are for that particular system. And I would tend, especially if you're new and you're not sure what you're going to be doing, to stay up at the top part of this list into the stronger area. It's just going to give you the most options down the road. All right, let's get into the specific camera recommendations. As I said before, I have come up with a whole bunch of different options for different types of photographers. I'm going to recommend cameras. And so we'll talk about one of these. I'll talk about what aspects of a camera that you want to look at to be good for that type of photography. And then I'm going to show you 3 excellent examples of cameras that would do very well for that category. We're going to start with the budget beginner. All right, you're getting involved in photography. Maybe you're young, you don't have a lot of money to put towards this new little hobby of yours. You're looking for something that is affordable, both in the cameras and the lens department, and something that isn't going to be too expensive to work going forward. And so there's some lenses that you can get into that aren't too expensive. The Sony a6100 is something that's been around for a while. It's a small camera. It's pretty easy to use. The lenses are affordable. There are lots of options out there. And Sony's one of the biggest manufacturers, and so it's a very safe way to go. All right, this is the only DSLR I'm going to be recommending in this whole section. The Canon T7, well, it's not a fancy camera, but you know what? It gets the job done for a very affordable price. The time of the recording of this class, it's about $400 with the lens to get a body and lens where you could go out and you could take a cover shot of National Geographic or whatever your favorite magazine, if you know what a magazine is anymore. There's a ton of Canon DSLR equipment out there, both bodies and lenses. You want to upgrade for this for a few $100. If you're willing to buy something used, you can practically get yourself a professional level camera because there's so many things being traded in from people going to Canon's mirrorless system. Now, if you are a budget beginner, this seems like a strange camera for me to recommend in some ways because there's not a lot of people out there using this camera. There's not a ton of lenses for it, but we know Canon. We know Canon's going to make a ton of lenses. There's a ton of options. There's a ton of growth potential with this camera. And this particular camera, it's pretty affordable, under $500 for the camera itself. Canon is making a number of very affordable lenses. They're making a whole lot of really expensive lenses as well, but they are making some affordable lenses. And you can also adapt on some of the DSLR lenses. And so there are a lot of options when it comes to this camera. And the route looking forward looks very bright for this system. And so that's actually my top pick when it comes to a budget beginner. That's the one I would probably take if I had to go out there and start photography on a limited budget and I was a new photographer. All right, how about a beginner has a little bit more budget? All right, well, I still like that Sony system. The a6400 is basically the 6100 with more features. And so it's going to cost a little bit more, but it's going to give you a bit more in features. The Nikon Z5 is one of the best entry-level full-frame cameras I've ever seen. And so when it comes to features, control, and operation of it, I really like it. It may be the best in this category, but I'm putting it here. I think the Canon R8 is just a really strong competitor with Nikon. Canon's always had a really strong name. They're the biggest manufacturer. This is where you can expect to have the most options in lenses and used accessories and used lenses and used cameras and everything else. The ecosystem with Canon is quite good now, and it's got a very, very bright future. And so the R8 and Z5 are very, very comparable cameras. I don't think one camera is significantly better than the other, but you might find that one's a little bit more to your liking than the other. All right, somebody with a little bit more budget, they want a full frame camera, not doing anything particular. They just want like a good, solid performing mirrorless camera, not the low end, not the super high end, Nikon Z6 II. This has been a very good selling camera. I know we've sold a lot of classes with this one as well. It's just a well-rounded camera that's got a good collection. Nikon has been very good about bringing out new lenses. They are especially good, at least at this point in time, with their telephoto lenses. They've got a lot of great options. So if you're into sports photography or wildlife, yeah, that's one of the attractive things to this particular camera is a good lens collection. The Sony a7 IV. Sony is great with technology. They've made a very nice camera here. Now, this is going to be the highest resolution of the cameras I'm recommending in this particular category. So if you're maybe into say, portrait or landscape photography, maybe travel photography, and you want a little extra resolution, the Sony a7 IV is a very, very good camera. My favorite camera in this category is Canon R6 Mark II. Once again, Canon is winning a number of these little categories, and that's just because they have a very bright future and they're coming out with lots of lenses. The R6 is just a well-honed camera. I was looking back at one of Canon's original digital cameras, the D30 actually. And one of the things you notice is that things really haven't changed that much in, what is that? Boy, how many years? That's getting close to 20 years now, because Canon really had ergonomics and the button layout of their cameras well figured out. They've been honing it and improving it as time goes on, but this is a really comfortable camera to put in your hands and shoot with. It's got a lot of features, and there's just a ton of lenses and growth potential in this one. Sports and wildlife, if you're willing to use or want to use a crop frame camera. This means that your lenses are going to be a little bit smaller, things are going to be a little bit more portable, and you can do so generally on a little bit easier budget. The Fuji X-H2S is a very fast shooting camera. It can shoot up to 40 frames per second. It's got 26 megapixels, which is going to be more than enough for most people. And it's got this pre-capture buffer where it will shoot before you press all the way down on the shutter release. And they are focusing a little bit more on some long lenses. And so they do have a number of good long zoom lens options for the wildlife photographer. Now, the Canon R7 is a very good camera. It's a camera that I have used for crop frame work along with my full frame Canons that I use. And I like the 1.6 crop because it takes the Canon telephoto lenses and makes them a little bit more powerful. 32 megapixels gives us a little bit more resolution. So this is the highest resolution of the three that I'm going to recommend here. And this also has that pre-capture buffer that the Fuji has. But maybe the best in this category is the OM System OM1. Now this is the micro four thirds, which means the sensor is a little bit smaller. It's not quite as good under low light conditions. But for using a telephoto lens, this allows you to really reach out and fill the frame with your subject. And that is a really, really valuable aspect in a camera. This is a well-featured camera. This is a professional level camera on the features and quality of it. It's just built around a smaller size sensor, which has a lot of benefits. And so all of these cameras will get you really good wildlife shots as well as sports shots. Now, if you want to do sports and wildlife, but you want to go full frame, well, we're going to be getting into kind of the more standard full frame cameras here. Start with the Canon R5. Yeah, it's a couple years old and we are expecting a replacement for it at some point fairly soon down the road here. But you know what? It still works fantastic. It's got 45 megapixels. You can crop in on your subjects. It's a great all-around camera. Sony A1 is Sony's highest end camera. It's got 50 megapixels, not really noticeable over the 45 megapixels, but it does have a very sophisticated focus tracking system. It's got a lot of good lens options that are very fleshed out at this point because Sony's been doing full frame for a long period of time. Now, I think the one that is probably going to win this category here is the Nikon Z8. Nikon took things to the highest level they could with the Z9 camera, and then they just made it a little bit smaller into the Z8 camera. And so for most people, the Z8 being a little bit smaller than the Z9 camera is going to be one of the advantages. Now, directly comparing the Z8 to the other two models here, well, the Z8 is actually a little bit bigger, and that might be a downside for some people. But it is offering some of the latest technology. Nikon has also been doing firmware updates to make sure that this camera is highly competitive with everything out there. But I think any of these three are going to get you top quality, professional quality sports and wildlife shots. All right, if you are absolutely into sports and you want the absolute best in here, there are cameras that are specially designed for shooting sports. With Nikon, the Z9 is going to be the fastest way to shoot at 45 megapixels. Now this one has the highest resolution of the three options in here. So if you want resolution and speed, this is going to be the best one. The Canon R3 is Canon's sports photography model. And while it doesn't have the 45 megapixels of the Nikon, it does shoot at 30 frames per second. And it can go up to 195 frames per second in special situations where you don't need autofocus. Say a batter in baseball hitting the ball. You can really get a lot of shots in a very short period of time. They also recently just added a new feature called panning assist, which helps stabilize the camera when you're panning with the subject, which helped me improve my panning shots by a fairly high percentage. So I was able to get more winners at any particular time. The winner of this category is the latest camera to come out. This is the Sony A9 Mark III. The A9 is Sony's sports camera. And the big change here is the global shutter. We can also do 120 frames per second with autofocus. And this is fully operational. So it has taken what these other cameras have done and quadrupled the number of shots that you can get. The global shutter is also going to mean that you can work with flash at all shutter speeds. So this really has a ton of capabilities. I know it looks a little bit smaller than the others. You can add a vertical grip on it if you want that vertical grip to it. But this is a very high performing camera. And as far as sports photographers out there, the big question is going to be what lenses are available. And Sony has had a 400 and a 600 fast lens for sports photography. They now brought out a 300 that looks very good. Sony needs a few more lenses to really be competitive long term. Nikon has the most options and the best collection of sports telephoto lenses out there for the pro sports world. Canon is kind of where Sony is. They've got a few of the pieces in place. I have a feeling that Canon's going to be bringing out more quickly than Sony will be, but we'll see what actually happens there. And so if you're into pro sports, you're going to want to look at the lens collection as well, along with the camera body. All right, nature and landscape. We're talking about cameras that have high resolution, something that you're going to be portable in the field with. Canon R5, we've seen this in a couple of other categories. Great all-around camera, good high resolution, good all-around features. Nikon Z8, another one of these great all-around cameras with fairly high resolution. If you want the highest resolution, the Sony a7R5. Love the flip out screen on that one, the little extra megapixel bump there at 60 megapixels. They all have in-body stabilization, so that can avoid the need of tripods in some cases. But all of these will get you shooting really, really top quality nature and landscape shots. All right, if you were going to shoot portraits, what would I shoot with? I'm thinking about high resolution, probably want to go full frame, but I'm also thinking about lenses. Which camera companies have really good portrait lenses? The Sony a7R5 with its 60 megapixels is the highest resolution in the category. Great all-around camera that we've talked about. Of course, the Nikon Z8. Yes, the Nikon Z8 is a great camera. It's in almost all the winners here. It's good for a multitude of different things. And I'm picking the R5. It's a couple years older, but you know what? Canon has a lot of really good portrait lenses. And so if you are interested in 1.2 lenses, they have options. Special lenses that are going to throw the background out of focus. Yes, they have options. And so is one really that much better than the other? Probably not. But they are all going to get you top quality portraits. Wedding and events. And so if you were somebody who needed a workhorse camera, didn't need to be super sports camera, didn't need to be super high resolution, just something that was steady, that was going to work for a lot of things, you're going to find some very similar results to our standard full frame camera. Nikon Z6 II, good all around camera. Sony a7 IV, it's not the specialty camera. It doesn't specialize in any one thing. It tries to do everything quite well. And then the Canon R6 Mark II is another one of these great all-around cameras that has a really strong support system with lenses and other accessories. All of those will make great full-frame general-purpose cameras. Now, if you're into shooting video, well, that's kind of a whole different set of categories, and this is where Panasonic comes into the game. The GH6 is going to be a great choice if you are looking for a crop frame micro four thirds system. If you want to go full frame, yes, they technically have higher end cameras, but the S5 IIX is a new camera that has a new autofocusing system that works really well and better than any of their other full frame cameras. And so while they technically have some more expensive cameras, this is the one that shoots video really well. And our final one in here is the Sony a7S III. Sony's always been good with video. They make a whole range of video-centric cameras, and they brought over a lot of the most important features, put it into a compact camera, and call it the a7S III. And so we do have a lot of options. We do not have 8K in this option. We do have, though, probably some of the best 4K footage you're ever going to get. All right, our next category is travel, one of my favorite things. And so here we want to have compact size in camera, and it's nice to have a camera that can do a lot of different things because you can't take a lot of equipment with you generally. First pick here is the Sony a7CR. This is their compact series of full frame cameras, the high resolution version of it. And this is getting you a very small camera. Now, this doesn't make the Sony lenses any smaller, but you can choose smaller lens options if you want. And there are a lot of choices in there. Now, I'm pretty happy with just something like a Canon R5, Nikon Z8 would be another good one in here. That's just a standard full frame camera. This isn't really that much smaller, but it does get you very, very high quality work in a relatively compact camera. But if you do want to keep things a little bit smaller, my favorite camera would be the Fuji X-T5. Fuji, as I said before, they concentrate on making the smaller size sensor cameras and lenses, and this will be a difference when you weigh your bag as to how much it's going to weigh and how much stuff is in there. I think this is just a really good travel camera. Gets you very high quality images, not quite as high as the full frames, but it's going to be more than good enough for professional needs and most everybody's needs. And so they have a lot of great options when it comes to lenses as well. And so that keeps the camera size down a little bit smaller. Our next category is adventure. What do I mean here? Think of river rafting, hiking, things like that. Obviously, size is important, but you also want durability and the ability to use it in a harsh environment. So the Sony a7CR, once again, high resolution, small size camera, means you can put it in a smaller bag a little bit more easily. Of course, the Fuji X-T5 is going to do excellent here. Does also very well under very cold conditions. And the physical controls might be nice for certain types of photographers that like to manually control things with their fingers out in the field. And maybe the best one in this category is the OM1. Olympus has always done a very good job with weather sealing their cameras for dust and splash resistance. And so this is maybe the most weather resistant of all the bunch. And it's also a little bit smaller, as well as the lenses being smaller. And so this is a really good system, especially if you're going to want to do any sort of long lens work. All right, our final category is we're going to kind of touch on medium format. If you were wanting to take things to another level beyond full frame, well, there is medium format. There's not a huge number of options, and there is limited benefits, to be honest, for most people going into medium format. But if you do want more resolution, then this is the place that you can go. Hasselblad X2D 100C gets you 100 megapixels in a fairly compact, very portable camera. There is a limited collection of lenses, but that's going to be true with any medium format system that you go into. But it is very lightweight. And so if you are looking for something a little bit distinctive and different, but extremely high quality and portable, that might be a good option. Next up is a Fujifilm GFX 50S Mark II. So they've refined their medium format cameras quite a bit. This is one of their latest generations. This has got a fair number of lenses, and Fuji is bringing out new lenses on a regular basis. And so this is kind of an exciting environment to be involved in. And this is where we're going with our top choice in here, the Fujifilm GFX 100 II. This gets you 100 megapixels, and it gets you into the most vibrant medium format system out there. Fujifilm is really coming out with lots of cameras and lenses, and if you are wanting to get involved in medium format, it seems that Fuji is really working the hardest to try to take the market. Hasselblad has a great name, but they have not been introducing that many new products. And so Hasselblad makes some great stuff. Just make sure that what they have is what you want, because it's a slow system with new lenses coming out. And so the Fujifilm GFX 100 II has been noted to be very close to its full frame competitors when it comes to performance in autofocus. It's not quite up to their speeds, but is performing on a level that medium format cameras have never dealt with before. And so if you are looking at medium format, that's really the go-to camera these days. All right, folks, there you go. Those are my recommendations when it comes to finding different cameras. Now, one thing that I can try to impart on you is that there isn't a best camera for everyone out there. There is going to be a range of cameras that are going to be very good for what you're doing, and it just really depends on what you find most important. The chances are, if you narrow it down to two cameras and you're just going back and forth between these two cameras, either one of them is going to work out just fine. Don't sweat it too much. Find something to hang your hat on, something to go, you know what, I just like the feel of this camera. I like the menu system on this camera. I like the lens collection on this camera. Find something that will just kind of tip it for you in that regard, and you're going to end up with a camera that you very much enjoy. Of course, you're going to want to get to know how to use that camera, and one of my classes might be able to help you out in that regard. And so, folks, I encourage you to do some research, get your hands on some camera, go out there and shoot with them a little bit, and you're going to make a great choice in a new camera for you. So we'll see you again, hopefully in another class. See you later, everyone.